I've got a friend in London. I thought I'd give her a surprise. So I sent her what I call joy in a box. So I sent her some little tiny seedlings of cosmos. Anyway, that she received them and that's great. And then I got a text from her, probably about a month ago. And she said, you've got your own joy in a box coming. And this was my joy in a box. And they were tiny. They had about 3 leaves. You're very grateful to begin with, and then of course you start to get picky. I moved on from it being enough that it was colour. It then had to be texture. I mean, Alan will say it just goes on and on. You don't stop. It just gets worse. The addiction gets worse.
Hello, welcome to Talking Dirty, episode 11. Over at East Ruston Vicarage, we have Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and devilishly handsome horticulturalist.
And in hot and sweaty old Cambridge today, we have Thordis, Maria Sophia Fredriksson, and Lily.
Lily, the slightly scruffy cockapoo. And joining us as the guest on our 11th podcast is the fabulous, the very lovely, the brilliant garden writer, lecturer and organic gardener, Val Bourne. So welcome to Talking Dirty.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be asked.
What, do you have any middle names? What?
I do, and it's Planty.
Oh.
I am Valerie Iris Bourne.
Oh.
Yes, and I hated it when I was younger, but actually, as I've got older, I quite like the name Iris because it's come back into fashion a bit.
Yeah, it really has.
I'm a twin. My brother's 8 years older than I am, and my elder brother was allowed to choose the names because he was so scandalised that 2 more children were going to be on the scene 8 years later. So that's the story of Iris.
Did you win in that name selection? Did you get the better names?
I think my brother got Alan Bernard because he had 2 friends called Alan and Bernard. I got a horrible name, Val, and then Iris. I don't know where that came from.
I think Val is rather interesting, actually. I quite like it.
Do you?
Yes.
It means strong.
Strong, carefree, opinionated. And this is Val, and she knows everything.
Now, the fact that you had a bit of a botanical inspiration to your middle name, I don't know if that speaks to a family that were into gardening. Where did your love of horticulture begin?
I am the product of a very bohemian family who, my father and grandfather in the film industry. I had the sort of family life where I would get up in the morning and I would never know who was going to be sleeping on the settee. That sort of life. And that's why I'm so boring and I don't drink and I don't party. But I had a grandmother who was born in Yorkshire in 1881 called Lucy Elizabeth. And she was a very keen gardener. And because I'm such a noisy, exuberant person who wakes very early and doesn't know when to stop talking, she would take me in the garden. So I was gardening from the age of 2 and 3. And she had a big garden in Beaconsfield, and she had a wardrobe with wonderful plant catalogues from Kelways and Scots of Merriott. And when other people were out there, doing discos and things like that, probably my parents, I would be sitting in the bottom of this great big wardrobe reading these plant catalogues. So that's how I got into gardening.
Oh,
very, very peculiar. All the different reasons. And that's why I'm an organic gardener, because she was born in 1881. So she was organic. And I think there's a very special link between grandchildren and grandmothers. And I have 4 grandchildren and I'm very close to them all.
I quite agree because Granny Gray was my mentor for ages. And I mean, I learnt from all my grandparents, actually, both male and female grandparents.
Yes.
Because I was the youngest, my mother and father were the youngest of each of their families, and the grandparents were quite old, but they had the patience to explain to a child that said, why,
Yes. And I know when I first met Tom Hart Dyke, he came up to me and said, I'm so thrilled to meet you because you were my granny, and she was his inspiration. You were my granny's favourite garden writer. And I said, well, thanks, Tom. I think that's a thanks, because it made me feel incredibly ancient. I am quite ancient.
How did you get into the garden writing then?
Well, I was a teacher and I got to be a deputy head, and I was offered a headship because they were reorganising and they couldn't really get candidates to apply. And I suddenly thought, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't know whether I'll probably end up in the funny farm if I become a head. And I had a friend who was working for Fruit of the Loom in the days when computers were the size of small suitcases, because it was 1994, 1995. And I was at her house and I was reading Gardener's World. And I always remember looking at it, and it was some young chap who did it. I can't remember his name. And all the plant information was wrong. And I got more and more irate. Geranium and Dressii doesn't do in drought. It's the first one to crisp up. And I got more and more irate. And if she had just got a new computer and she got her old one there and she literally threw it at me, luckily I caught it. And she said, if you can know so much, go and do better. And that was it. And it was a hard graft. I didn't know anybody. So I had to start sending off envelopes and they would come bouncing back the next day. And it's very, very difficult because often editors don't know about plants and they don't know who's right and who's wrong. But eventually I did get established. I mean, it wasn't easy. I lived on oldie baked beans on £3 a week. You think I'm joking, but I'm not.
No. But that's really inspiring because so often in the stories of people's success, it does hinge on knowing somebody.
No, and I'm not good with people anyway. Twins aren't. They have their own little mini world. I'm totally useless with people. I'm good with plants. I mean, I'm just not good with people at all. So
yeah, but plants can't answer back.
Pardon?
Plants don't answer back.
Yes. Yeah, and you can walk away whenever you want to.
Yes, exactly.
Relationships are slightly trickier.
But I do agree with you, Val, that I mean there are an awful lot of people, especially the younger members of the I'll call it profession if you like, but you know,
Yes.
garden designers and people like that, they come into the gardening world and they have a gift for garden design, but they don't know enough about the plants that they're designing with.
No, I get lots of designers asking me about plant information and what to grow. But you see, when I was younger, there was no plant finder. I mean,
No.
I would want to grow oriental poppies, so I would collect every oriental poppy I could find and bed it out next to each other. And then I would work out which the thugs were and which the ones I really liked were. Sadly, a lot of the ones I really like have gone because of downy mildew, but that's another thing. And I did that with so many plants. And I used to write begging letters to botanic gardens when I was a teenager and say, I'm a really keen gardener. I didn't even have a greenhouse. And they would send me seed of something that I'd seen, you know, that I really wanted to grow, like Incarvillea, delavayi. And I would grow it from seed. So that's how I started my plant knowledge. It's all first-hand experience.
And isn't that the really great way of learning? We talked to Bunny Guinness a few weeks back, who said that she won't consider herself a plantswoman because in all of her work, she doesn't have enough time and enough space to really grow things and get to know them personally. And you kind of need to do that in order to really be a plantswoman.
Yeah, I think you really have to be into plants. I mean, I've only got 1/3 of an acre here, sob. But I went out this morning and I was looking around for 1 or 2 things to cut, and I spotted a snowdrop, Ruby's Green Dream, with 4 flowers. And you know, I was so cock-a-hoop. I mean, you don't need drugs or alcohol if you've got a garden, do you? You just go out there, and then you go and you look at all your colchicums, and you know, they look so decadent and swooning.
Actually, they are looking absolutely fantastic this year, as you probably know.
Wonderful.
We have the National Collection here, and I mean, they are looking. I will tell you a little story. We had a plant event in the garden on Saturday, the 5th of September, and Richard Hobbs came and his partner Sally.
Oh, yes.
And they bought masses of colchicums, and because the colchicums were in the bank yonder, looking absolutely fantastic, they sold a lot of them.
Oh, I was going to write to him and say, because I usually go to the East Anglia bulb sale and I couldn't get any. Oh, damn. I've missed out on Richard.
I'm sure he'd be more than happy to oblige. And he'll be at our Snowdrop event in next February, which you're talking at, aren't you?
Yes. I haven't got the date. I appreciate the date. So I don't.
I'll give it to you in 2 minutes. Sarah will push it over my shoulder.
Yes. Yeah, I am. I'm very keen on snowdrops. I've got 300 different ones here, and I absolutely love them. I just love plants. I mean, I love peonies. I love hardy ferns. I love dahlias. I like roses. I've got lots of plant passions.
Val, the date is February the 7th next year,
February the
2021.
7th. Right, I remember that.
You just mentioned dahlias. I think dahlias are a particular favourite of yours, are they not?
They are. We're very cold here, and some of the dahlias that you can grow in the south, you can't actually grow. I can't grow here. For instance, Fergus has a hedge of that great big pink.
Fergus parrot.
Yes, great big pink giant deck thing. A huge thing. I can't grow it. It just never flowers in time. So
but you're talking about Dahlia imperialis.
No, I'm talking about one called, it's a big pink, and excuse me getting up, it's a big pink called Emory Paul, E-M-O-R-Y, and he grows it as a hedge.
Yes.
And they probably leave it in. I have to get all mine up.
Well, we leave ours in. I'm sorry to say that we leave ours in here in Norfolk as well. But being close to the sea, we are relatively frost-free.
Yes, you're so lucky. Yes. I mean, we're in the part of the country.
Interestingly enough, I've been raising a race of East Ruston dahlias, all of which are more than 2 meters tall, which can be a bit of a bind because, they need staking. And they get to strain at this time of the year to reach up and deadhead them.
Yes.
But they're in such lovely sort of pastel shades, and some have got dark foliage and some haven't. And I do this every year. I save seed, not scientifically in any way, but I save seed from a dahlia that I particularly like. And if we get one plant from 100 plants that I think is worth growing, we grow it. It's lovely.
Well, it's serendipity with dahlias because they're octopoids, so they have 8 copies of the same chromosome. So when the bees get in there, all the genes go up, and that's why you can get a seedling from the Bishop of Llandaff, like David Howard, which is they're both tremendous dahlias.
Yeah, exactly.
But, it is that's what interests me. I don't breed dahlias, but I like to cut them. And these big ones, I mean, I've got 4 in this vase, and they're just 4. And I cut them on Sunday. They're at the allotment. And this is Otto's Thrill, and this is Penhill watermelon.
Penhill watermelon will actually, as it ages, as the plant ages, and then we get to the lower light levels, in our garden here, it produces single flowers, which I think, in a funny sort of way, are even more beautiful than the double one.
Yes, yes, I know what you mean. They do when they get stressed. Dahlias, the stems get a bit weak, and they do go to single flowers. But if you wanted, these are all right to cut, but they don't last as long as the water lilies or the ball dahlias. They're the best for cutting. I mean, I'm not a flower arranger. I just like to go up the allotment on a Sunday and pick a few and bring them back to the house.
Exactly. What better way to enjoy them? I was very much against ball-shaped dahlias because I remember them from my childhood as being the kind of things that probably, shall we say, people who didn't have good taste used to grow and sell. But one of the bunch at the end of their gate.
There's a lot of snobbery.
Isn't there? Yeah.
This one is called Wine-Eyed Jill.
Wine-Eyed Jill,
that. I'm not a flower arranger, but I really do love that. And the ball dahlias do last really, really well. I love my dahlias and the water lilies.
Yeah.
So. I think I almost feel like I need to go and have a lie down somewhere. That was such a lot of like a big wall of fabulous dahlias hit me. I've got so many flomos now.
Well, I'm on the RHS Dahlia Committee, and we get a lot of people on the committee who grow dahlias for show, and they want to deadhead, they want to disbud them, and they want them to be absolutely perfect. But I quite like a bit of asymmetry and smaller flowers and lots of flowers.
Just going to write Wine-Eyed Jill down because I definitely need that one.
Give me smaller flowers and lots of them anytime. However, I just have to say that we do grow Dahlia imperialis, and this year I haven't got it in the greenhouse, but I normally plant it in a very tall greenhouse, in the bed, in the soil, in the greenhouse. Yes. And it flowers October, November, December, January. It grows to 12 feet tall. Its stems hit the ceiling, bend over and look down on you. And it's absolutely lovely. And if you know the Rosa Columbian climber, which
I don't know that rose, no.
Oh, it's a mid-pink very full, very double, and very scented. We cut the two at Christmas time, put them on the Christmas table, and it disturbs people. But I can't believe that the dahlias are on the Christmas table.
Yes, I've only got one species, and that's merckii, and I don't even know whether that's correct. But I don't grow them in the garden very much. I grow them all on the allotment because they like their own space, most dahlias.
Well, merckii is infinitely variable. I think we've got it throughout the garden here, and it's in every shade of mauve, from the palest wine-looking thing to a fairly dark colour.
The only reason I've really got it is because it's hardy, even in cold Aston.
Yeah.
Comes through.
Well, that's the thing about the species. Some of them are a lot hardier than some of the highly bred big fat doubles.
Yes, every autumn I have to go up to the allotment and dig them up and bring them in. And then every year when I'm doing that, and my husband Joe is helping me, he says, don't order any more dahlias, Val. And I go, no, I won't order any more dahlias. And virtually as soon as he's gone out the door, I'm on ordering dahlias.
The trouble is, there's always something else that you want to grow.
Yes, yes, there is. Yes, I'm a terrible sort of plantaholic.
Yeah, me too.
Mm.
Me too.
What this whole program's about.
Well, I started a little bit of rejuvenation in a border where I have Cobaea scandens, which this last winter, of course, which was a non-winter, non-event, it came through the winter with all its growth, and it flowered throughout the winter as well in the garden in our front courtyard. And it got a little bit out of hand and started to look a little bit untidy. So I thought, well, I'll just give it a quick tidy up. That was 2 days ago, and I'm still working on it. But that's what happens.
I mean, there's lots of things I can't grow here. I mean, Fergus is always going on about zinnias, and you know, I could commit murder because I can't grow zinnias here, however hard I try. And
Really?
we're just not warm enough. I mean, you go down to the Vale of Evesham and it can be 22 degrees. You drive up Fish Hill out of Broadway, you cross Snows Hill, and you've gone down 4 degrees.
Yes.
It's really chilly and here, but there's wonderful light. You know, we're on top of the Cotswolds, so we get this wonderful, almost harsh light.
Well, the wonderful thing is that life is a series of compromises, and we all have to obey that because, you know.
No, I don't know that I can do obey, though. No.
Well, we have to compromise.
Yes. Yes, so Cobaea scandens is completely out of my range. I have grown it, but it's miserable here.
Well, let me give you a tip. Cobaea pringlei is a white-flowered form and is quite hardy, much hardier than scandens, And it came from that well-known plant seller in Badsey.
Oh yes, Mr. Bob Brown.
Mr. Bob Brown himself.
Mr. Bob Brown. I'm on the trials with Bob, and
yes.
People should be a fly on the wall because we have some interesting exchanges. And I will talk about a plant, and I'll say, which we often do talk about plants, and I'll say, oh, Heliopsis, blah, 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 summer nights. I think that's a tremendous plant. And Bob will rubbish it. And then I'll go to a talk 2 years later, and he'll tell me how good it is. It's very annoying.
To go back to your garden, Val,
yes.
on the downside, there are lots of things you can't grow, but on the positive side, are there plants that there must be plants that really
it's wonderful peonies. And I've always thought it was because it was cold, but we've got deep soil and we're on the spring line. But you know, this year we had a really mild winter, and it rained from September until lockdown almost here every day. And we probably only had a couple of frosts, and it was mild. My peonies have never been better. I probably got about 50 peonies in my rose and peony beds, and about another 30 on the plinth. So again, the best beloved, please don't order any more peonies. I'm not sure. I have ordered some actually from the French nursery, but they haven't arrived yet. I always hope it'll be out when they arrive. So it's really good for peonies, and roses love it here because it's very big sky. And not like East Anglia, which is big, big sky, but because we're on the top, the light, and we face south, we get the light all day, and roses love it. And can I get up a moment and just tell you about 3 of my roses that I really love?
Yes.
Well, I used to garden in Hook Norton, which is the land of beer, although I don't drink. It was awful for roses, but this was one rose that I could grow, and it's Bonica, the little French
Bonica,
rose
yes.
from the 1980s. And the reason I love it is because it goes on flowering to about November, even here. And when you get the first clusters, it's later than most roses. So it starts in July, and you get about 20 odd buds on a great big crown. But the best thing about it is it's a rose that will do really well in poor soil. It really is a rose that no one can fail with, and lots of rose growers would put it in their top 10. Do you grow it, Alan?
That's one of Peter Beale's favourite roses.
Yes.
Yes, he told me that when he came in. He said, "Oh, you're growing Bonica, my favourite."
Yes, yes. Well, I used to go to Japan and lecture with Peter every year, he was great. And this is a rose that actually is associated with Peter. You couldn't have done better for me, because this is Gardenia.
Looks like it.
It's looking a little ragged, but it's actually a very big thorny thing that you could grow along a wall, because I've got low stone walls that I grow roses all the way along the wall, and honeysuckle right on the southern edge of the gardens. So they're actually in north-facing soil. And this Gardenia does very well here. And Peter knew about this rose. It's an American rose, bred by Mander in about 1899. I think that's the right date. And Peter had seen this in America, but had never been able to find it in Britain. And he went over to Jersey, because he was doing a talk in Jersey. And he told me that he saw the rose on a house in Jersey, and he knew it was Gardenia. It's very distinctive, because the foliage is very dark, and it's very sort of gently curving. It's almost like a sea monster rose. You get a really good flush of flower in June, and then you get another lot in September. David Austin says it only flowers once. Rubbish. Sorry, David. And Peter said he saw the rose. He went to bash on the door and asked for a bit. The people were out, and as he turned to go, a bit stuck to his trousers. So that's one of my favourite roses, Gardenia. And it has lovely scent, lovely sweet scent. And I'm very fond of hybrid musks. I grow those along the wall. And I always get these muddled up. I think this is Cornelia. There's two, isn't there? They're all Cornelia and Felicia. But I think this is Cornelia with these lovely coppery pink flowers.
Yeah.
And I really love this rose, because you get these rather large collections of flowers. And these hybrid musks, they're also good on poor soil, because they were bred in Essex by the Reverend Pemberton. And they're always really good in September. And he bred roses for scent. And so they're all, although they're very different, they're all scented. He's also responsible for Buff Beauty through his head gardener, Bentall. So Buff Beauty is another one of my favourites here. So I really do love my roses, and spend a lot of time in the winter trying to sort of prune them and look after them. And I've got 2 donkeys that visit over the wall and eat all the buds. So I try to chain them on metal hoops to stop them. So roses are really good here, peonies are really good here. And because the bottom of the garden's quite damp because of the spring, wasn't very good for snowdrops, but it's been very good for trilliums, although I've had to cast the shade and keep them out of the wind, and very, very good for hardy ferns. So the ferns are fantastic at the moment. All the polypodiums, cambricums are coming back into leaf, and they're like green Christmas trees. They're beautiful.
Well, Alan, I know that trilliums have been high on your wish list of late. So are you having a spot of trillium envy?
Well, I was, but I mean, I've only got, I mean, I did have a present arrive the other day, and it was 500 trilliums.
Yeah. Were they dry bulbs?
They were dry bulbs, yeah.
Yeah, they're very difficult. You know, when I was a child, Woolworths was the mecca for plants.
Yes.
And I would go down to Woolworths with my pocket money, and they used to sell trilliums that had been dug up from the wild and cyclamen. And I'd be rifling through the boxes to look for the bulb or the tuber or the corm that looked different from all the others. And I would pick that one out because I used to think that, you know, and I grow a lot of erythroniums as well. They're very good here. So it's not all bad news, definitely.
How are you feeling about Flomo, by the way, Val? Has any of this got the juices flowing?
Well, I have found Flomo very difficult because I haven't really been anywhere. You know, I couldn't go out because my husband's been very ill. So we've been stuck here since March, but also he was having a lot of cancer treatment last year. So we couldn't really go out last year either. So I'm finding it very, very difficult to come up with a FLOMO. I feel such a failure. There are so many things I want to grow, but I can't actually think of them at this moment. And I've been around the garden looking. There are several things I'm planning to plant. I want to plant a Philadelphus because I haven't got one. And with a small garden, you have to be quite selective. And I want to put one in because I simply love the scent of Philadelphus. I'll probably go for something quite hackneyed like Belle Étoile. Nothing too exciting. I do like new plants, but I don't actually, I don't always go for new. Some of the tried and tested things are really good to grow.
And better bets as well, I think, because they're tried and tested, as you say. And I mean, they are better bets. And, you know, some people often say to me, oh, but that's a common thing. But why is it a common thing? Because it grows very well for everybody, and people like it.
Well,
so
I
don't be so stupid.
To a certain nursery near Bangor because my daughter was at university there, and this was in the 1990s, that sort of time. And I would go up late 1990s, early 2000s, and I would go up 3 or 4 times a year. And I went to this certain nursery and I bought loads and loads of plants at vast expense every time I went. Haven't got any of them because they weren't tried and tested. A lot of them weren't hardy. You know, we have quite wet winters in the heart of England and they just perished. And there's lots of, you know, really established plants that I really love. And this one, I really like Japanese anemones. I'm not threatened by plants that roam about or self-seed. I just pull them up or get rid of them. I mean, a lot of people like things to be very regimented, don't they?
That's not interesting gardening.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, it's like a stamp collection if they garden like that. You need to let plants do what plants do. Yes,
because when I moved here, I thought the garden slopes down to a spring, and I thought, well, I'll put all my snowdrops at the bottom. Well, it was too wet, but it was wonderful for primroses. So I got a really big collection of interesting primroses, and I just let them be promiscuous and get on with it, and get some wonderful seedlings. So the snowdrops have had to move up the garden. And, you know, the best beloved is very unkind because when people come to see the snowdrops, I hear him saying, she's got the national collection of white labels. Isn't that unkind? But this is Honorine Jobert. And this was actually marketed by Victor Lemoyne, the French nurseryman. I say Lemoyne because my grandmother did, but I think it's probably Lemoyne. He was the first man to get the VMH from the RHS, and he's responsible for all the tree lilacs that were bred, 3 generations of a nursery. And this white anemone, Honorine Jobert, grew in this lady's garden, and then he marketed it. And it's the best white still. I think the date is something like 1821. I'm not good on numbers, but it's a very ancient plant.
It's a lovely plant. But the other thing I was just going to mention to you is that because I have a great friend who's a wholesale nurseryman, and he does these wonderful things. You mentioned peonies from France. Well, I've managed to get some peonies from France through my friend Richard, who went to France and sent me a list, a most amazing list. It took me about 3 days to go through it. And then we bought some peonies. But there's also now a wonderful double, messy, very pale pink Japanese anemone, which Rosie Hardy of Hardy's Cottage Plants has got, and I've just ordered from her. It has the disarming name of Frilly Knickers, but it is much nicer. There's your Flomo, yeah. But it is a very, very nice Japanese anemone, and I've just ordered 10 plants of it because she's got a very good offer on at the moment.
Oh, Frilly Knickers. Yeah, this is another ancient one called Bowles Pink, which has got the sort of 2 opposite petals that are darker. And this is much better for me than Hadspen Abundance ever was. And I rather suspect they might have been the same thing anyway. I don't know. They're very similar. And the other one I grow, and this rambles everywhere. When the roses and peonies are finished, this is all along the sort of front of the house side of the rose borders. And you sit down a little bit lower and you look through Pamina or Pamina, which I really do like. It's a double. But because we had so much rain in August, these are tremendous this year. I mean, they really like doses of wet weather plants. And one of the things I really love about Japanese anemones are the buds, because they always remind me of grey seed pearls. They're just so beautiful. And then you've got the green heads, and then they go a bit fuzzy. So I quite like things that sort of place themselves and thread through the garden. I don't like to be too much in control. I always say about gardens that I think of them like women in underwear that are a size too small, and they might just break out at any moment. That's my definition of a good garden.
Well, see, it's interesting to go back to the idea of gardens that are a bit like stamp collections. I think the idea of a more informal way of gardening can be quite scary, because it's what I'm drawn to. I absolutely want my garden to look like a lady bursting out of her underwear. That is my great aim. But yes. as a new gardener, I always find that I'm just a step behind what I need to edit. And it's always things are going over, things need more restricting, cutting back, moving, dividing, whatever, than I can kind of keep up with. So I think it can be daunting.
I think if you're an organic gardener like me, and I don't use anything, I don't use slug pellets, garlic sprayers, I use nothing. Probably the only slightly iffy thing I do is I put Vitax Q4 on my peonies and roses, and I don't know that's strictly organic, but I don't use anything. But that makes you have to put plants in the right place so that they stay healthy. Just like Alan said, you know, the plants do the talking for you. They're in charge. They tell you what they're going to do. So then you get all your woodland plants and your trilliums and your hellebores and ferns and everything in an area where there's dappled shade. You get all your summer plants, and I've got roses, peonies, garden phloxes, all the sort of summer flowering things are in the full sun area. And then I've got an autumn border that's full of grasses and tall perennials, because I'm still 3 years old at heart and I still want to look through everything. And by doing that, it's easier to manage, because I won't be cutting the autumn border down until about February, hopefully. Last year was so wet, I did cut it down a bit earlier than that, to give the birds a good chance at all the seed heads and the cover. I've been tidying my woodland borders to get them ready, because things will start rooting and coming through, and it's all underground, and I don't use any labels for erythroniums or trilliums, and I let them self-seed, you know. So I'm doing that in September, and then when I finish the September tidying, and I've sort of cut mini meadows in August and things, I shall go on to the summer border, and then I shall do that in about November time and get rid of everything. And I often take all the foliage off my roses in November. So it's spread out. And what too many people do when they're young gardeners is they think they're going to have the all singing, all dancing border that's going to go right the way through the year. And it's a disaster, because quite frankly, my peonies are ragged now. Past their best, like me.
No.
It's so true.
No, it's really inspiring to hear from someone. I mean, Alan, I find you inspiring obviously all the time, but 30 odd acres is a bit different to a little garden. And I have a tiny suburban garden. So it's always a bit like visiting National Garden Scheme plots, or Richard Hobbs, who we mentioned earlier, who has a real kind of treasure box of a garden, a jewel box, which is very small, and yet he manages to fit in amazing plants. It gives me hope that I can do it too. Now my FLOMO is brought about by my building up of a wish list of things for next year. I'm trying really hard to not buy everything, because I don't have space, but inevitably I will buy more than
Never puts me off.
No. I will end up buying more than I need, and I am obsessed with trying to grow things from seed. And it goes back to Chiltern seed, who I always end up getting seduced by, and it's the little pink dandelion, that Crepis rubra, is that how you say it? Yes. Which I've never grown before, and I'm just going to have to grow it next year.
Yes. Well, good luck. You know, I mean, I've never found it that enduring, but I do like it. And all those dandelion-like plants that look a little like dandelions, excuse me, and thistles are so good for insects. So you know, I'm with you on that one, definitely. It's a nice thing. Because I'm a great Chiltern Seeds fan, and many years ago, Chiltern Seeds, when their father ran it, Douglas, I think his name was, I'd phone him up in the Lake District and talk plants with him. We've still got a lot of bizarre seeds that we've saved over the years from Chilterns from their early days. It's a great company.
Yeah, really exciting. It gives me a lot of FOMO.
I think it's the best piece of bedside reading because it's the catalogue that you never get to the end of.
Oh yes, Chilterns, and it always arrived just before Christmas, didn't it?
Exactly. Yes.
Just on the doormat when you were dreading Christmas because you got to go to Auntie so and so, and you could console yourself by saying, "When I get back, I will read the Chiltern seed catalogue in bed, you know, with a pen."
Yeah.
I still love that catalogue.
So, Alan, do share. What's your FOMO this week?
Well, my FOMO this week is I like to have plants that I grow myself that I can bring into the orangery throughout the summer. And one of the things that I have never had the success that I think I should have had with is Malmaison carnations.
Oh, yes.
And if you know Malmaison carnations, they are proper carnations that smell like carnations. They're unimproved. They're messy things to grow because the calyx split and the flowers can be shaggy and messy, but there's just something about them that is just so wonderful. And Jim Marshall, who I know, he has I think the national collection of them. And he's down in Suffolk, and I'm going to actually ask him if I can have a few slips or something like that from him so that I can do my best to grow Malmaison carnations, because in a large 8, 10 or 12 inch flower pot, just to bring them into the house when they're flowering is absolutely beautiful. I mean, they're not beautiful to look at in a funny sort of way. They're gawky plants, they're messy plants, but the scent is and the history, I think, as well. It just makes them something that's worthwhile keeping going, and I want to do it better.
I used to grow one that I had from Jim called something like Stormy Seas, and it was a sort of mixture of blue and pink. It was almost like litmus paper that hadn't quite turned.
Oh yes,
the description. But I had that for a number of years, and then you get a bad winter and you lose things. And I'm not absolutely sure whether I still got it or not. I'd have to go and rummage.
We've got a dianthus that we grow in the garden here, which is, I think it's maybe it's the only one. It has those kind of petals that are split, and half of it is a kind of purple and the other half is a brilliant red. So the petals are striped and streaked.
Sounds wonderful.
They were called bizarre carnations, weren't they, years ago?
Yes, yes.
And I think this is about the only one left, and it has a very grand name of Mrs. Cholmondeley Farron.
Reminds me of my poker Prince Igor that I had from Mrs. Charworth Musters up at Felly Priory. I went to see her, and she took me up into her bedroom, which had a 4-poster bed, and she flung open the window so that I could draw the pattern of the topiary. And when I turned around, she had a shotgun, and she was pointing it out of the window, and I was between her and the window. And she said, "I sleep with this under the bed and shoot the rabbits and foxes." And I love my Prince Igor poker because it always reminds me of her with her shotgun.
Yeah.
They're so lucky. I mean, plants are just wonderful things because they're so much more than a plant. They're memories, aren't they?
Indeed, they are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, before I let you go, I'm going to run one question by you both, which came in from Peter in Switzerland. You can always email questions for Alan and our resident expert of the week, our guest, to hello@getgardeningnow.co.uk. Peter did that and attached some photos from his garden in Switzerland. He came over to England. He visited Alan at East Ruston Old Vicarage, which obviously he loved. And he forgot to put his witch hazel Diane onto automatic irrigation. He's got about 30 pots on his patio, which are all automatically irrigated, and he's quite happy about that. But when he got back, the leaves on Diane had all dried up, and over the next few weeks, it got worse. But he woke up one morning recently, realised that it was in full flower, seemingly 5 months early. But the flowers are yellow, not the usual red of Diane. So what has happened? And he's wondering, will it flower again at its expected time?
I think probably the plant has suckered. It's a grafted plant, I would suspect. I've got one in the garden here, and it's suckered from the base. And of course, the flowers are the plant that is being grafted onto. Invariably, you've got to take those suckers off, because if you don't, you'll get the wrong color flowers anyway. But they are also much more vigorous than the plant that is grafted. So you've got to get those off and get them as close to the main stem as possible. And you may have to do a little digging to do that, because some of them sometimes come from slightly underneath the ground, but you've got to do that and get them off. Reason it's flowering now and instead of in the winter is probably because the strange sort of, shall we say, climatic influences that we've had, with great heats and great droughts, and then suddenly lots of rain and wind and all the rest. Plants get slightly out of kilter. I was clearing a bed of...
like my snowdrop, which is flowering in September.
Yeah, well, no, maybe your snowdrop is one of those Regne Olge varieties.
It is, but I've never had one in September before.
No, well, it is very early, actually. October's normally in the month, isn't it?
Yes.
I was mentally thinking I must go and look at mine to see if they're in flower, but I don't think I'll bother, because I think they'll probably be waiting.
I was slightly more cynical about Peter's witch hazel, because I know from experience that misnaming is rife with witch hazels, and I wonder whether he got the wrong plant anyway. But the one thing that witch hazels hate is they hate summer drought, and what they do is they drop their leaves to vertical to avoid transpiration, and that's a real sign of distress. Whenever you see a witch hazel with its leaves going straight down, you've got to get water on it. And I'm not that good at watering mine, but John Massey up at Ashwood Nursery has wonderful witch hazels with enormous flowers, but he pours water on them in the summer. And I mentioned going to Japan with Peter Beals. We always used to go in the rainy season. And when it rained in Japan, it used to come down like stair rods, and you'd be walking through inches of water quite often until it drained away. So these plants love, summer moisture, and then they're like a dry winter. So, if you do, I've lost one this year, and I think it's because I let it dry up. I didn't notice that it was in distress. I'm hoping it might come back. I haven't pulled it up or dug it up or anything.
No, it's very wise, isn't it? Yeah, it's very wise.
Yes.
It's often like gardeners after a sharp frost in the winter, they think plants are dead.
Yes.
And maybe they're not. And I mean, I remember the last really hard winter that we had here was 2009, 2010, I think.
Yes.
And we had, our bananas were raised to the ground. You probably had -12, we had -2 in the garden here.
Yes.
It did quite a bit of damage, and hebes in particular lost lots of their leaves, and everyone said they were dead. And I said, no, they're not, they will come back. But the thing is, you have to put up with the fact that they gaze reproachfully at you until about the middle of May before they show any sign of regrowth.
Yeah. Well, it would probably be the end of June here. And we did have once, when I was gardening in Northamptonshire, we had -26. It was like something out of Dr. Zhivago, the ice patterns on the windows. Amazing weather.
Wow.
So we never know what we're going to get. That's the trouble.
Bit like on this podcast.
Yes. I'm sorry. I should apologise now if I've talked too much.
No, it's been an absolute joy. I just sit here. I am so grateful that I get to be part of these fabulous plant-filled conversations. I just keep writing it all down. And
I haven't got a pen, but I'm saying frilly knickers.
That's gone in.
It has been my pleasure to be part of this podcast.
Oh, it's been lovely.
Plantaholics heaven.
Yes. Could we do it every day?
Let's. Mind you, I need a much bigger garden, generally, but if I'm going to keep writing all these plants down and want somewhere to grow them. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you, Val Bourne.
Lovely to talk to you, Val.
Happy gardening, everybody.
Yes. Happy gardening. Hello?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh. One that does this in the garden. What are you doing, Thordis?
I'm very hot.
Thordis thought you would like that painting. It's called The
I
Merry
do
Garden.
like it. Yes, I like it
and
enormously.
It has all the world leaders doing Morris dancing. I also have Boris as a jester. And
Well, yeah, he's very good at that.
May doing a very hard stare. And over there, I've got Corbyn dressed as a Roman emperor.